Fpyq Jiang. Chapter 70. Helpless. Empress Dowager Lan and Li Chen sat across from one another, tear stains on his face. He was currently under the gazes of everyone. During the day, they kept watch beside the previous emperor's coffin. Come night, he had to start going through the leftover memorials. No one had expected the previous emperor to pass away so suddenly. The previous emperor had recently felt his body aging and his health declining. He was merely a bit over 50, but the exhaustion of many years had accumulated. He had long since had trouble getting erect. But the more this was so, the more the previous emperor didn't want to lose to his age. These past few years, he did not stop sleeping with his imperial concubines. So much so that he used medicines to boost his sex drive. With this, he could prove he was still hale and hearty despite his age. Who would have known he would die miserably on top of a young imperial concubine? The court eunuch who had presented that medicine to the emperor had already been executed, and that imperial concubine would be buried with the previous emperor. Wearing a dark green palace robe, Empress Dowager Lan sighed. "Don't tire yourself too much," Li Chen said. "Right now, everyone has their eyes on grandson. Grandson cannot slack off the slightest bit. The Ministry of Rites has scheduled the day of your ascension on the 3rd of the next month. There's still time. Grandmother hasn't aged to the point where I can't see clearly. Don't worry about the matters within the palace. Just leave it to grandmother." "Grandmother," said Li Chen, choking with emotion. "Grandson should be letting you enjoy a life of happiness with your great-grandchildren. Instead, I'm giving you more work." Warmly, Empress Dowager Lan said, "Grandmother knows you are exhausted these days. You can't get results overnight for these things. The Empress and her people cannot make any large waves. She wasn't my match when she was young, much less now." Li Chen nodded, remaining silent. But now that the Empress was mentioned, Empress Dowager Lan looked at Li Chen with worry. "Once you ascend the throne, what will you do with the people of your estate?" With indifference, Li Chen said, "Grandson will help the tertiary consorts find new marriages, and have the crown prince estate prepare their dowries. Secondary consort Ji and secondary consort Wei will be conferred the position of consort. Yingqiu will be conferred the position of imperial concubine. Then what about little Qi?" Li Chen's gaze fell upon his grandmother. In a calm manner, he said, "I won't let little Qi leave my side. Little Qi will be our great state of Kang's empress. If it were other people, they would certainly yell preposterous, but the one before his eyes was Empress Dowager Lan after all. In the past, she had held up the country for more than 10 years. During her reign, many sycophantic officials secretly presented petitions to elect her as a female emperor. Empress Dowager only shook her head with a smile. "This will be too difficult." In a low voice, Li Chen said, "Grandson will not choose anyone else to be empress." Grandmother understands." Her eyes carried a smile, yet she let out a deep sigh. When the previous emperor had still been around, his sons could still remain in the capital. Now that he had passed away, Li Chen could spread them all over the country. In the future, their eldest legitimate sons would inherit the noble position of second-ranked prince. If they did not accumulate any merits or achievements, it was very likely their hereditary title would decrease with each generation. Just like what had happened to Li Yu's father, who nowadays only carried the noble position of marquis. One could become the emperor who towered above others. One had their descendants' status fall more and more. Every prince thirsted for victory, to preserve such paramount glory. The Ministry of Rites issued the posthumous title of Emperor Wu for the previous emperor. His tomb had long since been constructed and his coffin had been placed in the imperial ancestral shrine in advance. On the 26th of August, the previous emperor was buried. On the 3rd of September, Crown Prince Li Chen ascended the throne. When Li Chen received the imperial seal, the crowd of court officials bowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times to him, shouting, "Long live the emperor!" Li Chen took his seat on the towering dragon throne, overlooking them all. From that day on, he was no longer afraid. He could now fully use the things he had learned his whole life, leaving behind a page of himself in history books. You may rise. After Li Chen had ascended the throne, his birth mother Empress Zhou, who was also his legitimate mother, was conferred the position of Empress Dowager. The imperial concubines of the previous emperor who had given birth and had titles would remain in the palace. However, there were some changes that occurred there. Most of the imperial concubines would move to the imperial monastery and become nuns, using the rest of their lives to pray and recite Buddhist scriptures for the previous emperor. Empress Dowager Lan was now the Grand Empress Dowager. She still lived in the Palace of Merciful Peace. Once Li Chen had finished most of his duties, he realized that it had almost been 1 month since he had last seen little Qi. The princes and princesses had yet to be brought to the palace. At present, all Qi Yunruo did was continue to supervise the Crown Prince estate and play games with Jing'er. Sir! Her Highness Consort Ji is here again. Frowning, Qi Yunruo walked forward. What does she want? Lulan said, Consort Ji still says she wanted to see Eldest Prince and that she wanted Eldest Prince to stay at Frost Autumn Courtyard for a few days. Definitely not. This slave told her that without the Emperor's permission, Eldest Prince must remain at Ink Lotus Courtyard, but Consort Ji said that His Majesty had already personally conferred her a position as one of his 4 consorts, and she said you did not have the qualifications to obstruct her. If she has the ability, tell her to come to Ink Lotus Courtyard, Qi Yunruo replied. Naturally, Consort Ji could not come to Ink Lotus Courtyard. The guards of the Crown Prince estate were guarding that area. However, that did not mean she could not meet with Qi Yunruo. 4. He would leave Ink Lotus Courtyard eventually. As such, Consort Ji placed people near there in wait. Once they saw him come out, they would inform her, and she would lead her entourage over in a grandiose manner. Ever since Li Chen had entered the palace, he had yet to return. Qi Yunruo brought the 2 princesses to stay at Ink Lotus Courtyard's west wing. Currently, the Crown Prince estate could not tolerate the slightest accident. Qi Yunruo would patrol the estate at regular intervals as a result. In an overbearing manner, Consort Ji approached him, to which Qi Yunruo stopped in his tracks, staring at her in silence. Qi Yunruo no longer resembled the youth who had entered Prince Chun's estate 5 years ago, not the slightest bit. He had learned an imposing manner from Li Chen. The composure of managing the prince estate. It was to the point where even Consort Ji was distracted, unable to remember those days when Qi Yunruo possessed a humble status, kneeling to pay respects to her. But she quickly composed herself. With a cold snort she said, "The Emperor is not here at the moment. Eldest Prince cannot live alone, so send him to Frost Autumn Courtyard. Without the Emperor's decree, I cannot let you see him." Consort Ji sneered. What qualifications do you have to say this? Could it be that His Majesty already sent out an imperial decree, saying that we mother and son cannot meet? He did not. Then give me Eldest Prince. It's because I can't trust you, said Qi Yunruo, looking straight at her. The last time you met with him, Jing'er could not sleep well for many days. You will be a bad influence for him if he's with you. In a flash, Consort Ji's face flushed scarlet. Ever since she was conferred the title and rank of Consort Di, who didn't rush to curry favor with her? Right now, Qi Yunruo was nothing. So, what right did he have to look down on her as he talked to her? Consort Ji had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. Who knew if the prince was aware of what she had said last time? It was all Qi Yunruo's fault. He was the one who didn't give her enough time to explain things clearly to Jing'er. Consort Ji said, "In the future we womenfolk will be living together in the imperial palace." Adjutant Qi, Sir Qi, her gaze was very fierce as she looked at him. Your good days are over. Qi Yunruo said, whether or not my good days will be coming to an end does not depend on you. To which Consort Ji laughed, expression full of ridicule. Do you really think the Emperor would still favor you? What a joke! You are a grown man. Don't tell me you can continue entering the palace and serve the emperor? In the future, the crown prince estate would no longer exist. The position of adjutant would also become unnecessary. His Majesty won't even give you a position as an official. Which civil or military official doesn't know your roots? Qi Yunruo didn't want to join her in talking nonsense anymore. He turned around to leave, but Consort Ji mistook that for him being scared. She yelled, "Now you know to be afraid? Humph! Let me tell you this. Jing'er is my son. He is the emperor's eldest son, his identity noble. If you sincerely care for him, then stay away from him." Qi Yunruo could not take it anymore. "Consort Ji, I think what's best for Jing'er is if you stay away from him. You may not be aware of this, but right now, you really make people want to hit you." "Oh!" Consort Ji crossed her arms and sneered. "You want to hit an imperial concubine? His Majesty has truly spoiled you to the point where you overestimate yourself. Did Consort Wei want her child back? Of course. Once they entered the imperial palace, the princes would inevitably be separated from their birth mothers. However, what Consort Wei wanted the most right now wasn't her child. Rather, it was the position of empress. As long as she became the empress, her son would be considered from the legitimate line. Moreover, he would be the emperor's only legitimate son. Currently, she could not expose any weaknesses people could grab onto. She was very happy that Consort Ji provoked Qi Yunruo. The more stupid things Consort Ji did, the better she herself would look. Consort Wei had been conferred the position and title of Consort Xian. She and Consort Ji were of the same rank. Consort Wei did not oppose at all that the prince was liking Qi Yunruo more and more. If the prince truly liked this man to the point where he had no interest in other women, then he would not take on a new woman as empress. And her chance of becoming the empress would increase. But how could she make contact with her child without angering Qi Yunruo? Consort Wei closed her eyes, deep in thought. Meanwhile, Consort Ji and Qi Yunruo were still arguing. Qi Yunruo's heart had originally been accumulating much worry and stress, growing all the more agitated. To the point where he had actually considered hitting Consort Ji. However, he suppressed these dark thoughts. Despite this, a layer of frost appeared on his features. "Consort Ji, although His Majesty has conferred you the position of consort, you have yet to enter the palace." A trace of confusion flashed through Consort Ji's eyes. "What do you mean?" However, Qi Yunruo only moved around her. This time, Consort Ji did not block his path, staring blankly at his back figure. Qi Yunruo shared a close relationship with Jing'er, Yan'er, and Mu'er. The little Princess Ying'er was still too young and thus not sensible. Only Chu'er continued to keep a distance from Qi Yunruo and had some conflict with him. In the evening, as he ate a meal alone in the main chamber, Chu'er entered and asked, "When will father return?" Qi Yunruo said, "Once your father finishes with what he needs to do, he will summon Chu'er to the palace." "Father is not coming back here." He shook his head. He smiled and said, "Once you enter the palace, you'll be able to see your father." To which Chu'er nodded. "I want to bring younger sister outside tomorrow." In Ink Lotus courtyard, Chu'er wasn't lively and active like the other children. She was always unwilling to play with her younger sister and other siblings. For the most part, she would spend her time inside. Qi Yunruo could not help but ask, "What will you do outside?" Chu'er looked at him, guarded. Inwardly, he sighed with emotion. However, he still smiled. "I can send a few people to follow after you as you carry your sister past the watery corridor. I want to go to Winter Plum Courtyard with younger sister." The smile on Qi Yunruo's lips stiffened. A moment later, he nodded. "All right. But may Chu'er tell me what you want to do there? I heard from the nannies that once we enter the palace, we can't leave anymore. I want to take a few of my mother's things." Qi Yunruo looked at her, then he smiled and nodded. Early the next morning, he arranged for people to send Chuer and her sister to the inner courtyard. Ying'er still did not know what they were doing but was excited to be going outside. Qi Yunruo watched as they left. Then Lulan walked to him and said, "Her Highness Consort Wei gave second prince a bowl of lotus seed congee." Qi Yunruo furrowed his brows. However, Her Highness Consort Wei merely left behind the congee and went on her way. She did not say a word. He nodded. "I understand. Then that congee. Don't give it to Muir. This slave knows." Yet, Lulan's expression did not relax. She had followed Qi Yunruo for a relatively long time. Naturally, she understood the affection between the Emperor and Adjutant Qi. Lowering her head, she sighed. "Sir, you cannot keep being at odds with the two consorts. You need to prepare in advance." He sank into an inescapable exhaustion. He waved dismissively. "Enough. You don't need to say so much. I already understand." Come noon, Qi Yunruo grew aware that sacrificial wine specialist Wei had come to visit his daughter, yet no one had informed him of this meeting. Chuer took a few pieces of jewelry Qi Nikan had once used, and when she returned to Ink Lotus Courtyard, her eyes were somewhat red. Qi Yunruo did not miss that when she was looking at him, her eyes not only held estrangement, but also traces of hatred. His gaze fell upon the older female servant by her side. That woman had her head lowered, too afraid to look him in the face, but a moment later, she gritted her teeth and did just that, staring straight into Qi Yunruo's eyes. Yet, he merely clasped his hands behind his back and left in an unhurried pace. In the evening, Qi Yunruo lay in bed. At long last, he could describe his emotions in one word, and that word was helpless. This wasn't the first time he and the prince had been separated for so long, but even during the period they had been apart in Xinyuan country, he was able to persevere, relying on the hope that he would one day see the prince again. Now, in the crown prince estate, he sensed visible and invisible enemies all around him. However, this time, he could not see any hope. He had never felt so far away from the prince before. Since a few days ago, Consort Wei would give a bowl of congee to Muir every day early in the morning. Consort Ji would appear from time to time in front of Qi Yunruo, wanting to take her child back. When Qi Yunruo thought he would one day explode from her harassment, the Crown Prince estate received an imperial decree. The imperial edict stated that the princes and princesses were to enter the palace in 3 days. After Qi Yunruo had led the two consorts to receive the decree, Consort Ji seized the opportunity to go to Jing'er's side. She crouched and smiled. Jing'er has grown taller again. Refined and courteous, Jing'er bowed. Jing'er greets Consort Mother. "In a few days, you'll be going to the palace," said Consort Ji, pleasantly surprised. "How about living with me for a few days? Once we enter the palace, we will have less chances to meet." His first reaction was to look at Qi Yunruo, but Qi Yunruo did not notice him. He then lowered his head, and it was a mystery what he was thinking. Although Consort Wei found it odd that the emperor didn't summon them all into the palace together, the most important thing at present was that she could finally see Muir. Consort Wei walked in front of Muir, tearful as she said, "It's been so long since I've seen you, Muir. In this period of over a year, did you miss me?" In a somewhat alarmed manner, Muir took a step back. But a moment later, he realized that Consort Wei did in fact seem familiar, and walked back to her. Consort Wei smiled. "Mother personally made the lotus seed congee that I sent you. Did you like it? If you do, Mother will make it for you for the next few days." "I didn't drink any lotus seed congee recently," said Muir. Naturally, Consort Wei knew this, but she merely looked at Qi Yunruo in an embarrassed manner. "Sir Qi, you really made things difficult for a mother's heart." Qi Yunruo took a step back and said with indifference, Whatever you say." Consort Wei was shocked, not knowing how to respond. Then Qi Yunruo said, "Consort Wei, don't think people are stupid and can be fiddled around with by you whenever you want. I only have one thing to say to you. You have been conferred the position of consort, but you have yet to enter the palace. Don't overstep your bounds." To which she lowered her head. Consort Ji, who was at the side, laughed coldly. "Today, I want to bring my son to Frost Autumn Courtyard." Qi Yunruo looked at Jing'er and asked, "Do you like to go?" Somewhat awkwardly, Jing'er looked at him. He found sense in his birth mother's words. In the future, once they entered the palace, it would be even harder for them to meet. As such, he said, "I won't return to Ink Lotus Courtyard tonight, all right?" "Just for tonight." Qi Yunruo nodded. Consort Wei shifted her gaze to Muir, hoping that he would take the initiative and ask to go to Yulon Magnolia Courtyard, but Muir only stared blankly at Jing'er then at Qi Yunruo. Qi Yunruo had already turned around to enter the bedroom. Everyone felt that Li Chen's ascension to the throne represented Qi Yunruo's loss of power. A newly crowned emperor could not give the imperial censors a reason to censure himself that quickly. Some people thought that even if he still liked Qi Yunruo, he would only keep him outside the palace. So, when Li Chen appeared before him, Qi Yunruo could not believe his eyes. Li Chen did not wear his dragon robes and only had on dark clothes for everyday use. He had appeared silently in Ink Lotus Courtyard's main chamber. Qi Yunruo had not had his meal and was just in the middle of reclining on a chair as he read. He didn't read much of its content and was just about to do that when he heard someone with a familiar voice cry out, "Little Qi!" Qi Yunruo trembled in shock for a moment. Before he responded, he was already out of his chair, rushing to Li Chen, the address that he was most used to leaving his lips. "Your Highness!" Li Chen smiled. Qi Yunruo then lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty." Li Chen gazed at him. When Qi Yunruo looked up, he saw that Li Chen's features carried exhaustion. At once, he realized he must have pushed aside many duties to come here today. Qi Yunruo reached out and caressed his face. Li Chen placed his hand softly on top of his. "Your Majesty," Qi Yunruo's eyes were slightly moist. "Your Majesty, why did it take you so long to return? In this period of over a month, I did not know what to do. Just hand it all over to me, little Qi." Li Chen withdrew his hand. Qi Yunruo stepped forward and hugged him. Then Li Chen said, "Don't worry anymore. From now on, you have me." He nodded. He was also very tired. A moment later, Qi Yunruo found it hard to keep his eyes open. "Lie down," said Li Chen. Pulling on his clothes, he replied, "Your honored self too." "All right." Actually, there were still many things Qi Yunruo was unsure of and which brought him unease. There were many things he wanted to tell the prince, but the moment his head hit the pillow, he fell unconscious. During their period of separation, he had held on by himself and it was truly too exhausting. Even though everyone thought the prince would abandon him, when Li Chen appeared, Qi Yunruo finally felt relieved and fell asleep in peace. Li Chen looked at his sleeping face. After he looked at it for a long time, a gentle smile appeared on his own. He bent down and kissed his lips. "Little Qi! Wait for me, little Qi!" The next day, when Qi Yunruo roused, he sat up in a hurry and looked all around. However, the room was completely empty. "Lulan." "Yes, sir," she said, coming in. Qi Yunruo wanted to ask her where the emperor went, yet reason returned to him, and he only said, "Where is eldest prince?" Lulan frowned. "Just a while ago, eldest prince returned to Ink Lotus Courtyard. This slave wanted to report to you, but your honored self has not slept this well in a long time. Thus, this slave did not disturb you." Eldest prince seemed very unhappy when he returned. "What about second prince?" "Last night, Consort Wei had brought Muir with her back to her residence." Lulan said, "Second prince has yet to return. Should this slave go there and rush them?" Qi Yunruo thought for a moment. Nodded. "Yes. Have people bring second prince back now. If Consort Wei is unwilling, say that Muir fell while in her care before. Moreover, ever since eldest princess fell gravely ill, I don't dare to have any of the children leave my side so easily. Just say it like that. Lulan was a bit uneasy. Qi Yunruo lay down. She will know what I mean. A good while later, he got up and dressed, preparing to make for the southern wing to check on Jing'er. Don't tell me Consort Ji is still this stupid, and would directly say those words. End chapter. Fpyq Jiang. Chapter 71. Young Children. The previous night, Jing'er nervously made for Frost Autumn Courtyard. Consort Ji's emotions were stirred as she kept calling for people to bring him things to eat and the clothes she had most recently sewn for him. Jing'er was very thankful as he looked at her. He told Shancha, the maid that accompanied him, to accept all the gifts. Still, in Jing'er's heart swirled some ill feelings toward Consort Ji. The last time she had fiercely told him to stay away from Uncle Little Qi, it pierced his heart. Jing'er had just passed his 6th birthday. He was already at the age where he could distinguish between right and wrong. Jing'er knew that by choosing to spend the night at Frost Autumn Courtyard, Uncle Little Qi would be hurt. However, the faint yearning for his mother compelled him to go. He wished his mother would not be like how she had the last time, but would be gentler and softer, good and kind-hearted. That she would treat him well not because of the fame and profit, but because she sincerely cared for him. Yet, Consort Ji only felt that her long-term and hidden desire, so hidden that she dared not think of it, had finally been achieved. The prince first became the crown prince, then finally became the son of heaven. Her son was the emperor's eldest son, and the princess consort, an unlucky woman, died early. If her honor increased as her son's position rose, in the future, she could become the most honorable woman in the world. Consort Ji was afraid of having conflict with Jing'er again and did not mention anything bad about Qi Yunruo. She understood that even if they weren't related by blood, since they spent all day together and Qi Yunruo was accustomed to coaxing people, he and Jing'er would naturally be close. She sneered in her mind. However, his good days were coming to an end. In the future, he would no longer have a chance to be close to Jing'er. He would gradually disappear from Jing'er's mind. In Consort Ji's opinion, if her son and a male pet were close, it would undoubtedly be a black stain on her son's reputation. Luckily, the second prince had also lived in Ink Lotus Courtyard for a long time. The basin of dirty water could also be splashed onto Consort Wei and her son. Thus, other people would not have the chance to use this reason to attack the emperor's 2 sons. Consort mother, I'm full. Jing'er smiled apologetically. Consort Ji realized that she had continuously fed Jing'er for a very long time. She smiled. You're still in your growth period, and need to eat a lot in order to grow taller. Jing'er nodded. Consort Ji and Consort Wei's recently built friendship had already fallen apart following Li Chen's ascension to the throne. They both had sons, and were now each other's enemy. Moreover, the hatred they shared currently was even deeper than the hatred they had shared back when they both lived in Frost Autumn Courtyard, in 2 little houses facing opposite of one another. In a careful manner, Consort Ji probed, Jing'er, is second prince good at his studies in Ink Lotus Courtyard? Jing'er replied, second brother hasn't started his studies yet. She let out a breath of relief. She smiled and said, I heard second prince only knows how to play all day. Since you 2 live together, does the noise bother your studies? Jing'er furrowed his brows a hint. Second brother is lively but Ink Lotus Courtyard is large. He listens to the wet nurses and older female servants, and does not disturb son. With sincere and heartfelt wishes, Consort Ji said, Jing'er, there are some things you will not understand. Other people won't tell you but I, your birth mother, will. I will help you understand. From now on, you must pull ahead of second prince in everything, so that he cannot overtake you. Jing'er looked at her. At that moment, he recalled a scene in Ink Lotus Courtyard from not too long ago. He did not remember the reason, but he and Muir had quarreled. Uncle Little Chi had held both of their hands, smiling gently as he said, "Jing'er, Muir, you two are the closest brothers in the world. You must help each other grow. Later on, you will have many people trying to drive a wedge between you two. If you don't have even one person that you can trust, that would be too sad. You two must be kind to and love each other, must help each other." Chi Yunruo's expression grew gloomy. "You are still children. I should not be telling you these things, but I fear that the people by your sides would try to lead you two astray with their words to birth misunderstandings between you two, to cause you two to no longer be close, making you fight and scheme against each other, and struggle against each other for no reason. Jing'er, Muir, do you want an enemy or a brother? Or a close friend?" Muir rushed to be the first to say, "I won't fight with Big Brother over anything. Big Brother and I are the closest." Since Jing'er had already started his studies, his words were more refined. He shot his little brother a glance and said, "I will keep loving younger brother dearly and guide him. Fighting among brothers won't happen with us." Chi Yunruo stroked each of their little heads. Jing'er blushed as he faced the ground, and Muir kept talking excitedly, saying things like he would also treat his big brother well, that he would study with his big brother in the future, that they would practice martial arts together. Silently Jing'er looked at Consort Ji. Consort Ji still didn't understand why her son kept quiet and continued, "Mother will just tell you that second prince's birth mother is not a simple person. Sometimes, she treats mother like a fool. However, mother knows that her son won't be simple either. Fortunately, you are older than him, and have become sensible earlier. You must always be better than him, so that your imperial father will take note of you." Consort Mother. "It's getting late. Son is getting tired." In Consort Ji's opinion, he was already such a big child, and it was a good time to instill her beliefs into him. Thus, she furrowed her brows with discontent. However, she wanted to cultivate affection with her son right now even more, and so she said, "Then have a good rest. Think properly about whether what mother said is true. Mother will discuss the other things with you tomorrow." Lowering his head, Jing'er said, "Yes." The children at Ink Lotus Courtyard were still young. In the past, Chi Yunruo didn't force them to wake early. However, Jing'er had just started practicing martial arts and so, developed a habit of waking up 45 minutes after 5 in the morning to hold squats. Imperial Guard Fang Gur trained him in the outer courtyard of Ink Lotus Courtyard. Since Jing'er was staying at Frost Autumn Courtyard today, he decided to sleep in. Once he roused, he would make directly for Ink Lotus Courtyard, and he instructed his first-rank servant girl Shanja of his plans tomorrow. But while it was still dawn, a noise woke Jing'er up. When he opened his eyes, he saw Consort Ji's unhappy gaze. She said, "Jing'er, you've already started your studies. Why are you still not up?" Jing'er sat up and looked at the color of the sky outside. "It shouldn't be the period of Chen yet. Jing'er, quickly rise. Have the servants bring you your homework. Right now, you ought to memorize all your books before second prince starts his studies. Mother's paternal grandfather and father are all erudite scholars. In the future, mother will have your paternal grandfather teach you and will recall your paternal great-grandfather from the rotten northwest for you." Jing'er was finally fed up. He said to Shanchu, "Big sis, help me change clothes." To which Consort Ji nodded. "That's right. Jing'er, don't be lazy and want to sleep more. Once you're finished with your lessons today, mother and you will talk again." However, once Jing'er had finished changing, he said straightforwardly, "Consort mother, son will return to Ink Lotus Courtyard now. Son cannot skip a day of practicing martial arts." Consort Ji was startled and blurted out, "It's fine to skip a day." With impatience written all over Jing'er's face already, he retorted, "Consort mother, didn't you just say I mustn't slack off on my homework? Father accumulated brilliant military contributions in the northwest. Son wants to imitate father in diligently practicing martial arts. He did not return to Ink Lotus courtyard for a whole night. Uncle Little Chi must be worried. However, Jing'er did not say that thought aloud. Consort Ji froze on the spot. She could not even say one word of retort. Son will take my leave, and return to visit you in the future. With that, Jing'er saluted her and turned to leave. When Chi Yunruo went to see Jing'er, the latter was ripping off his own clothes, wanting to lie down in bed while wrapped in blankets. A smile spread across Chi Yunruo's face. He walked over to him and asked, "Still sleepy?" Jing'er covered his head with the blankets, not a word left his lips. However, a moment later, Chi Yunruo's ears caught soft sobs. Jing'er was aware that he was the eldest son and that he needed to have the dignity of an eldest brother. Even though he was still young, he had long since stopped crying from a young age. When he had first started to practice martial arts, Chi Yunruo saw Jing'er's legs tiring until they hurt. Yet, Jing'er would just clench his teeth and smile, saying he wasn't tired. Now, Chi Yunruo did not open his mouth to ask, he only accompanied him in silence at the side. A while later, Jing'er said in a sobbing tone under the covers, "Uncle Little Chi, little brother won't fight with me in the future, right?" Without even thinking about it, Chi Yunruo replied, "Yes. You two will always be the closest of brothers. Me and little brother will be good to each other," said Jing'er, voice trembling. Slowly, Chi Yunruo pulled the covers off Jing'er's face. His gaze was full of gentleness. He reached out and wiped away the remaining tears on Jing'er's face. A smile graced his lips. "I believe in Jing'er and I believe in Muir." Jing'er sat up then threw himself into Chi Yunruo's arms. Chi Yunruo looked at him and slowly, he stroked the child's hair. In fact, Jing'er wasn't crying because of him and his brother. Rather, he was weeping about his birth mother. Why did his birth mother say such things? Jing'er already had benevolence in his heart. He also knew that being benevolent was the right way to go, like his father and Uncle Little Chi. However, when all was said and done, Jing'er was unable to say such words to his birth mother. As such, he could only feel wronged, could only feel sad, could only sob mournfully. After a while, Lulan returned and said in a soft voice, "Sir, second prince is somewhat unwilling to return. He still wants to stay with Her Highness Consort Wei." Jing'er crawled out of Chi Yunruo's embrace. Resolute and decisive, he said, "I will bring little brother back." Chi Yunruo looked at Jing'er. A bit embarrassed, Jing'er called for a servant to draw water for him to wash his face. After a moment, he said, "Second brother is still young right now and doesn't know right from wrong. There are some words that can give him a bad influence if he hears them. I must bring back little brother and take care of him properly." Chi Yunruo nodded. I'll trust in you." Jing'er once again dressed then left the room. Following that, Chi Yunruo glanced at Shansha. Faintly he asked, "What happened?" After Jing'er had left from Ink Lotus courtyard, Chi Yunruo summoned Chuer over. He finally pulled himself together again. He didn't want to be passive and avoid things like how he had a month earlier. Nevertheless, he needed to figure out where Chuer's hatred toward him came from and who fostered such hate by talking to her. Right after he made the command, he set off. "Never mind, I'll go myself." In the West Wing's reception hall, Chuer sat upright in a chair, maintaining the composure of an imperial princess. Miss Ning, her wet nurse, stood behind her. Chi Yunruo said, "Second young miss, may I speak with you privately?" Nanny Ning said, "Denied. Second young miss is an imperial princess. How could you speak with her alone? Then think of me as second young miss maternal uncle." Nanny Ning froze. "All right," said Chuer. "Nanny Ning, you're dismissed." Chi Yunruo took a seat opposite of Chuer. "You'll be entering the palace the day after tomorrow. Have you prepared everything yet?" "The preparations have already begun." He looked at her. A sigh escaped his lips. Second young miss, I think there is a misunderstanding between us. Somewhat alert, Chuer's gaze fell upon him, her little body twitching with unease. If I've guessed correctly, it's because of Her Highness the Princess Consort. Biting her lip, Chuer said, you caused mother's death. Young children had yet to master how to conceal their emotions. Just one sentence from Qi Yunruo, and she revealed all the hatred hidden in her heart. I know it was you. They all told me my mother fell ill because of you. My mother died because of you. Qi Yunruo discovered that he could not refute her. He had no way of telling Chuer that Qi Nikan had suffered from pent-up frustrations, that the accumulated poison from all the medicines she took broke out, causing her to fall severely ill. He also could not say that the evil things Qi Nikan had done that lost her the prince's pity. It would be too cruel to a child who loved her mother. And it wasn't something a child her age was capable of bearing. This, Qi Yunruo just said, Princess Consort didn't die of illness because of me. Second young miss, why are you unwilling to believe that I do good by you? Did Qi Yunruo treat her well? Naturally. He managed the inner courtyard and gave Chuer and Ying'er the most exquisite things, took the utmost care of them. But no matter how great these material things were, it could not bring back their mother. Qi Yunruo said, perhaps you will understand once you grow up. I have never thought of harming anyone. In the future, it will be very hard for you and your sister to return to this estate. It's sunny today. You can bring your younger sister out to play. Qi Yunruo rose to his feet and prepared to leave. Through eyes hazy with tears, Chuer looked at him, yet not a word escaped her lips. Jing'er led his younger brother by the hand back to Qi Yunruo. Muir had his head lowered, what was on his mind a mystery. Complacently, Jing'er said to Qi Yunruo, I brought little brother back. Muir's personal maidservant was called Zijing. Qi Yunruo told Jing'er to bring Muir inside, and to have Zijing stay behind. Frowning, he asked, did Consort Wei say something she shouldn't have? Zijing replied, Her Highness Consort Wei only said she missed her son, but would not allow this slave to stay by his side to serve. This slave watched from afar. Consort Wei kept talking to Second Prince with a smile on her lips. Afterward, Second Prince could not bear to part from her. Although Qi Yunruo nodded, worry filled his heart. If Muir grew closer and closer to Consort Wei, his own attempts at obstructing them would only push Muir away. Sometimes, blood relationships were hard to sever. Yet, the moment he thought of Consort Wei's methods, he grew afraid. Oh right, sir. Yesterday this slave heard that Her Highness Consort Wei once again invited sacrificial wine specialist Wei to the estate. That once she entered the imperial palace in the future, father and daughter would meet even less, so she wanted to see her father more during this period. Just meeting her father, not her mother. Correct. Her Highness Consort Wei only invited sacrificial wine specialist Wei. Qi Yunruo couldn't help but think, if she misses her relatives, Consort Wei wouldn't just invite Sir Wei over to the estate. Don't tell me it's because it's for something only Sir Wei can do. As the children prepared to board the carriages to leave, Qi Yunruo could not bear to see them go. He still didn't know what the prince was planning, didn't know when he could see those children again. Yan'er was a sensitive child and the first to start crying. Her gaze was upon Qi Yunruo, making him feel even more forlorn. Jing'er led his younger brother onto the carriage by the hand, voice soft as he said, I will miss you, Uncle Little Qi. Muir said, me too, me too. I will miss you. To which Qi Yunruo smiled. Meanwhile, Chuer brought her younger sister into their carriage. After Qi Yunruo had sent off the children, he sighed deeply with emotion. From now on, those children would no longer have the simple identities of a prince estate's young masters and young misses. Instead, they would be the sons and daughters of the most honorable person in the world. In the future, one of them would grow up to be the next generation's emperor, one would become a prince of the first rank, and the rest would become imperial princesses, using the glory of the Son of Heaven to marry ideal husbands. In the future, there would be great attention on their each and every move, their lives recorded meticulously by historians. Wearing a cloak, Consort Wei watched from afar as Muir grew farther and farther, her gaze serene. Consort Ji kept wiping at her tears with a handkerchief. Consort Wei smiled at her. Elder sister, perhaps very soon we can reunite with them. A smile spread through Consort Ji's face, yet her heart was brimming with disdain. Her son would definitely be the most successful. In the future, Consort Wei and her son might have to spend their days depending on her own expression. End chapter.